Hey, I posted something to the same effect at Instagram. So if you follow me there, forgive me for a little bit of repetition. But I've been reflecting on this. I've been reflecting on my response, like what's happening in me in relationship to this interview I heard with an artist I like named Diplo. Diplo is a DJ producer, and I like him a ton. I like his music. I like the culture around him too. He does these, as an example, he does these 5K races all over the country. You register for the race, you run a 5K, and then you go to a DJ set like immediately afterwards. And so it does some of the work that I think great art does, which is it forges connections between people. We have like runner people who don't go to dances who are like going to the dance. You have dancing people who are now running, and like I just think it's cool. I think he's cool. So I was really bummed to hear him say in this interview about the use of AI tools that as a producer, he doesn't believe it's worth it for singers to try to compete with AI because you're just easily replaceable. In the interview, he said, like, I can find the perfect voice for the perfect song, singing the perfect notes, something along those lines. And so that bums me out on so many levels. I have so many issues with it. One of which is it doesn't really line up with his career as I know it. And I'm not to say he doesn't. This is not to say he doesn't mean what he said, but he probably does. He's a really smart guy. But some of what's made his career and his artwork magical and beautiful has been his partnerships with singers. So a few years ago, he did this track with an artist named MIA, and it's this like it was like really cool. It was like transformative track. It changed a lot of the way people did music in his genre, and it also like kind of raised her profile in parts of culture and in the marketplace in ways that wouldn't have happened to raise his profile as a producer and DJ. Like their partnership, their human partnership, and the work they did together, like propelled both their careers. And that's been true, with him and lots of other DJs as well. Is like the singers have mattered, and these partnerships have mattered. So there's that, but then also more broadly, if you've been in the arts for any amount of time, it's not because no one makes it long term in the arts just based on merit. Like regardless of how good you are, and he's great. Regardless of how good you are, some of why you're still around after a while is because someone's given you a break, because someone has put some work into you, because someone has given you grace, all these human functions that the machine doesn't have. No one's art career is predicated entirely on their ability to pin it and get it right all the time. It's there's almost always an underpinning of some kind of development. And there's a whole other conversation to be had here about the absence of development deals in rock and roll and in the publishing world. That it's a thing we should be doing without question, is developing artists, developing writers, developing painters. We should be doing development deals. We should be financially investing in creators, and we're not. Which brings me to the next point. Part of what my deepest issue with what he has to say is the conflation between the making of product and artwork. These are two separate things. Now, can there be an overlap? Can I make art and then sell it, and does it remain art? Yes. But the motivation behind making something a product versus making art, I think those are actually two separate tracks. The making of a product has to do with like the value of a product is predicated on its sellability, and the marketplace, the machinery around the music, the machinery around books, like gets to decide the value of everything. The value of the thing is whether or not it sells. The value of an art piece is not predicated on whether or not it sells. The value of an art piece is predicated on it's a sheer act of will. I decide that this is worth it because it belongs to me and it came from me. That's the value system. That's beauty. Like I'm making something beautiful. That's the value system of art making. They're two different value systems. So the way I wrote this in for Substack, it says, I create. I believe I create because I want to make beauty. And I make beauty because I want to be beautiful. And my desire to be beautiful is how my soul plans to escape the machine, which would make me a commodity and a product. My longing for beauty and the practices by which I pursue her is how I become and stay human. They're how I remember I am valuable, not because I produce or sell, but simply because I exist. I think the motivation behind at the core of making art is separate from making a sale. I'm trying to draw things out of me. Things are emerging from me that are not perfect intentionally. And these imperfect things that have come from me in the practice of making art, I have to give them time. I have to give them grace. I have to give them attention. I have to give them work. The work is the point. And these things that have emerged from me that I'm giving grace and time and work and effort and forgiveness, I'm learning to do that for myself because I am imperfect. This is part of how art redeems human souls. Is I learn by these things coming out of me and treating these things with a kind of kindness that I don't normally treat myself. Oh wait, I am imperfect the same way that my work is imperfect, and I want to treat myself and the world around me the same way I'm treating these things that are emerging from me with kindness and with patience and with work. That this is worth it because I've said it is and not because it sells. I am worth it because someone has said I am, whether that's God or me. That's the value economy in the making of art. Actually, someone who gets to that, I'm gonna see if I can find the quote here, is a few days later, I saw an interview with Billy Corgan. I'm gonna not find the quote, unfortunately, in which oh no, he says right here, it's Billy Corgan, who was the primary songwriter, like maybe the only songwriter for the band Smashing Pumpkins, has a solo career. If you're not familiar with Billy Corgan's work, he's fantastic. But he says about his use of AI, like he doesn't. He says he just flatly just does not use AI in his songwriting process at all. And he says, and here's why. He says because of the pressure, the inspiration, the soul searching. That's all part of the journey the songwriter needs to go through. That for Corgan, the struggle, the work is the point. That the songwriter is becoming a songwriter in the practice and the process of making art, and that is the value in it. Again, like, can there be overlap? Can I sell a thing that I've created after, like, through that process? Sure. Does it diminish it? Well, we can have that conversation. But confusing and conflating those things the way that Diplo did in the interview, it, I think is a massive problem. I said to a room full of people a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I was at an arts conference in Winston-Salem called The Breath and the Clay. And as part of my talk, I said to this room of artists, I said, I don't care what it, I don't care about your book, and I don't care about your painting, and I don't care about your poems, and I don't care about your songs. And I was being a little bit harsh. And I was trying to create a little bit of a scandalous moment. I don't know if I really nailed that, but what I was trying to do is I was trying to parse artists from the things they're making, um, because I wanted them to recognize the thing that makes what they're making valuable is their relationship to it. That they are the thing that is of value in their art making process. You are the thing that is valuable in the creation of your work. That's the thing I care about. I don't coach artists just to get so their processes get refined so they make better work. I do want you to make better work, but I don't want you to make better work at the cost of your soul. And that's kind of what Diplo was suggesting, is that he can make better work by sacrificing the human element. And I think that's massively problematic. If you want to make that, then you're making products, and that's fine. If that's what you wanted to make, you wanted to make products, and it's entirely predicated on sales. But for most of the people who get into the studio, for most people who sit down and put pen to paper, for most of the people who pick the guitar, sit down at the piano, it's not about trying to create something sellable. There's something emerging in your soul that's gonna take time and patience and care and work, and that the invitation there is that you are becoming someone who recognizes yourself as beautiful, and that you can trust and treat yourself as a beautiful thing. That is the invitation. That is the value invitation at the core of art making. I go back oftentimes to this thing that C.S. Lewis said about the nature of beauty. He says, we do not merely want to see beauty, We want to be united with the beauty we see, to pass into it, to receive it into ourselves, to bathe in it, to become part of it. I think that's the value system in the middle of making art. When we remove that part, when we sacrifice our process because it's too much work, and we place what we're making squarely in the value system of the machine, we end up devaluing ourselves as human beings. I think the gift of art at the core of culture is it actually asks us to be completely human, that this thing will be imperfect. Another piece of this reflection is if you finished a book, or if you finished an album, or if you finished a series of poems, or if you finished a painting, part of what you know is when you're done with that project, you don't feel entirely perfectly great. You never feel finished because it's not perfect. I don't think we're designed to feel perfect. I think we're designed to sell ourselves out. I think we're designed to give ourselves over and submit to the long process of becoming. Even when you're finished with the book and it's as good as you can make it in your timeline, it's still not good enough. It's still not perfect because we are still in process. And in the making of art, we learn to give ourselves over to the long process of becoming that never ends over the course of our lives. Art trains our hearts, souls, minds, and bodies to quit thinking about ends, to quit thinking about sales points, and to actually give ourselves over to this long, long process of becoming. In fact, I honestly wonder if there is any discipline on the planet quite as adept, quite as powerful as art making in helping us receive ourselves as fully human in that way, to see ourselves in the long process of becoming. So, all that to say, I've been chewing on this for a while. This is why I coach artists. I do want you to make great work, but I want you to make great work as you become fully, completely who you are as a human being, because that will have made your work worth something. You and I probably both know people who are selling really well, who are miserable in their lives. And it's potentially because in some part of their process, they've given that process over to a machine that has told them that they're not worth it because their sales numbers don't line up. I want better for you, which is part of why I do what I do. So I've been chewing on this for a little while. I hope that's helpful.